Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode here on Ancluiche with me, Seamus Brady, your host, and for this one I'm joined once again by Sinéad Farrell from the 42, and we are going to give a full preview of one of the best fixtures we could have possibly asked for from the weekend here coming up. The All-Ireland quarterfinals are back, Sinéad, and this is a preview of what I think a lot of people in the country are looking forward to as their main event from the weekend. Dublin versus Mayo, Sunday at 4 o'clock in Croke Park. And look, all of the quarterfinals are going to be epic. Kerry Tyrone, Armagh Monaghan, Derry Cork. But Dublin and Mayo, the history over the last 10 years in particular, I mean, what a game this is going to be.
Yeah, unbelievable. It's funny, when the draw was being made and it was closed, I was kind of thinking, it would have been nice if it was just open war, anyone can play anyone, you could have any number of permutations. But I think what they've landed on is just as good. I mean, there's rivalries everywhere, and even the Derry Cork game, although it's the first time since the 93 All-Ireland that they're playing each other, that will actually be a nice little throwback for anybody who can remember that game. And then in conjunction with Kerry Tyrone, everybody knows the recent rivalry, the rivalry from 10 odd years ago. That's going to be another really intriguing one. And Dublin Mayo then as well. It's just, I think everybody probably knew, no more than when, the draw for the preliminary quarterfinal, I think everyone knew, God, we were going to get Mayo. And I think everybody kind of knew it had to be that Dublin were going to get Mayo then in the quarterfinal. And I mean, it's just like, it's the most kind of pronounced quarterfinal of the lot. There's such a recent rivalry there. Mayo, I suppose, prior to beating them in that famous game in 2022, I think it was, or 2021, 21, yeah, and interrupting the run of championship wins that they had. Maybe up to then, Mayo might have felt a bit like they mightn't be having Dublin's number, but they have to feel a bit more confident going in this time. Having been the team, of course, it has to be the most Mayo thing of all, that they will be the ones to interrupt Dublin's run, and then go back to reverting to type, where they just, and we've talked about it before, where they take these massive steps forwards and then they slip up, and they beat Kerry and then go out and lose to Cork. Like, it's just, they're the most unpredictable, enigmatic team in all of sport. And going up to Dublin, I mean, even with all that, they will feel so confident going up to play Dublin. I think that's the one team they would have wanted, and now they have them.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that, because I think when the draw was being made, there was kind of the announcement that the draw had been made, the fixtures came out, and the general feeling with me and the people I was with when the draw came out was, Mayo will win this now. Now that they've got Galway, now that they've got literally the hardest team they could have possibly got, now that they've backed themselves into the corner that they would never have wanted to end up in, they'll come out swinging and they'll win this game. If Mayo go through a season, if Mayo win this game, they have to go win the All-Ireland, because imagine having a season where you beat Galway, Kerry and Dublin and don't win the All-Ireland. I mean, that would be a real head scratcher. But yeah, to give the rundown on the Dublin Mayo rivalry. So they've had 18 meetings in total in championship football. Dublin have won 11. There's been 4 draws, and Mayo have only beaten Dublin 3 times, which is something that you would swear Mayo have beaten them more often. But they beat them in 2006, 2012 and 2021. Now, of course, you were mentioning about the last decade, the 2010s. You think about the 2015, 2016, 2017, 2019, 2020. Dublin were just able to get that little bit narrow bit over the line against Mayo. But that is the greatest team of all time. 6 All-Ireland titles in a row. I don't think it's up for debate. But it's one of those things that Mayo were the only team that were able to go toe-to-toe with that Dublin team continuously over that period. And they saved Gaelic football from being boring during that period, I think it's fair to say. So, and you are right. Like, that Mayo team, in my opinion, is one of the greatest teams of all time as well. Like, even though they didn't get over the line, they still had some of the best players I've ever seen. And I do think that you cannot underestimate how important it is that Mayo have beaten Dublin now. Like the 2021, that monkey off the back. Now they've got that off their chest. They have beaten Dublin more recently than Dublin have beaten them. And going up to Croke Park as relative underdogs, there's nowhere that they want to be more.
Yeah. And I mean, going back to that 2021 win, and it was just this huge result But then they went into the All-Ireland final and they were so flat. And it's almost as if it was a curse to beat Dublin, or I don't know, all their momentum was kind of spent on that. And how do you come back down from beating Dublin, and even the manner in which they did it? I remember I was covering that game. I think I was doing the live blog for that game. And in the first half, and I'm not from Mayo or anything, but I was disappointed in them. They were just so limp. And I remember Aidan O'Shea got a mark and kicked it wide from like outside the penalty spot or something. Yeah. It was so, you just felt like, here we go again. Another, Mayo aren't going to turn up at all today.
But they were like that, Sinead. They were. Dublin didn't finish them off. That's the one thing that everyone forgets about. Dublin that year were bang average. And they were there for the taking. And Mayo should have been beaten after 40 minutes. Dublin didn't put them away. That's the one thing that nobody talks about. Dublin let them get back into the game. If that Mayo team had played the Dublin team of 2017, Dublin would have smoked them. That's the one thing that people do forget. So Mayo can't have that 40 minutes this time.
No. But then this Dublin team isn't the Dublin team of 2017.
It isn't either. But I do think we're better than we were 2 years ago. I think we attack a bit more.
Yeah. But I think we talked about this before, how, Roscommon exposed how Dublin can be unlocked. Kildare as well in the Leinster Championship, although when they met again, obviously it was a different story. And I mean, look, in whatever shape, and Dublin have beaten, there's been games where Dublin have beaten Mayo out the gate. It's not that every time Mayo play Dublin, they can match them, but they can match them. And when Dublin were at their peak, Mayo were the only team, and only for them, that would have been Dublin would have just been so dominant and untouchable. Only for them, it came down to, a Dean Rock free off the ground and, in the dying seconds, and the Lee Keegan throwing the GPS tracker. There was just nothing between them. And I think it's going to be the same again when they meet this time around. But I mean, the odd thing though is that, like, with Mayo, you still don't know what way they're going to turn up. Now, it was very encouraging to see Cillian O'Connor coming on the last day after all his injuries and maybe not starting and not having a nailed on starting position. He looked really fresh against Galway. And Galway, they had Mayo on the ropes in the first half, and only for their poor shooting, Mayo wouldn't have been able to claw back in. And that's all Mayo need. They just need any kind of chance, any sort of chink of light, and they'll cling on to it, like they did with Dublin in Croke Park that time in 2021. As long as they can hold on to something, they have a way of working their way back into the game. And they will be no matter what, they will be underdogs going into it. Although I don't think they shouldn't fear Dublin as much as they have maybe in the past, because they were the ones to show that they could be beaten, that they were human, and they had stumbled a small bit from the heights that they had in the past. But it's just so hard to know with Mayo. Like Aidan O'Shea has been totally reinvented this year. He's really playing well. I was really struggling to see a future for him in the Mayo team in the last year or so. And under McStay, do you know what? He's gotten the public off his back. There was a time when you couldn't open Twitter after a Mayo game without Aidan O'Shea's name getting eviscerated by people. And he's been able to quietly go about his business this year. He's just been able to put in performances. It's not all on him. And if they're not playing well, he's not getting all that vitriol that he did in the past. It's kind of been spread out a bit more among the whole team. And that's a big factor in all of it as well. And then with Dublin, I just don't know. I just wasn't really convinced by them, during Leinster, during the group stages. It's going to be it's going to be really even. And it's just so hard to tell what way the game's going to go.
Yeah, no, without doubt. The last one I'll show to you before we do make a prediction on this is you mentioned the Galway game. You mentioned, obviously, the Roscommon game about Dublin. Which team do you think can implement what they would have learned about the other team from these games? Because Mayo, for example, for me, here's the one thing that they have that is definitely a weakness to them. There's a clear blueprint for how to frustrate Mayo, which is to play that defensive style that Roscommon played, that Cork played, that Louth played. Like, get bodies back, sit deep, don't even think about trying to, go man to man with them, and be like, hey, you're the favourites. Come get us. And once Mayo have to do that and they can't run through the lines with Owen McLaughlin, Jordan Flynn catching you out at pace, they don't tend to blow teams away. And this is what I'm talking about. Whereas with Dublin, I don't think there's as clear a blueprint on how to get Dublin to play like that. I think Dublin have just played crap in some games that they've had. I don't think it's necessarily to do with a system, more so. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think just because with the familiarity they have with Galway, I think Mayo will learn a bit more from that and the manner in which they came back in that game. And it's just, I mean, getting one over, the rivalry between Galway and Mayo is vicious. I wouldn't say there's one person in Galway who would like to see Mayo break the weight for winning All-Ireland. There's not a beating hard enough that they could take that Mayo or that Galway would offer sympathy to them. And to come back the way they did, I mean, Galway were really looking good at half time. And then, Damien Comer got injured. Shane Walsh wasn't really playing that well and hasn't been in great form this year. Now, and that's just, he's a victim of his own genius because he played so well in last year's All-Ireland final and that became his benchmark. And people just expected him to go out and do that every game. And he, people forget that he'd had a really long campaign with Galway, then with Kilmacud Crokes. He'd had the scrutiny of the transfer to Kilmacud Crokes, a long campaign, then the All-Ireland Club final and the controversy of that. And he needed a break. And he took a few weeks. He went to Australia. I think people criticised that and thought maybe he came back in a bit cold. And possibly that's, well, I suppose you can say that now because they're out and he didn't have a great year, but he still needed a break. He had to take time out after such a long year like that. And I know the Glen lads went back in with Derry pretty soon after, and that's their choice, but he needed, and he ended up getting the flu then in the Connacht Championship. I think he had the flu just before the final against Sligo. So he probably just wasn't right this year. And then they had other injuries as well. Rob Finnerty had an injury earlier in the year, and Sean Kelly was limping around the field against Mayo.
Looking at that, should Ryan O'Donoghue be suspended for this game?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, he should be. I don't care.
I don't know where people are saying
at
he's looking at the ankle. He's looking clearly at the ankle. And I like Ryan O'Donoghue. He's a great footballer. He's a great forward.
And you know what? I actually kind of hope he isn't, because if he is suspended, I think that gives Dublin a massive boost in terms of potentially the game not being as competitive. I want a competitive game first of all. Yeah. I think Ryan O'Donoghue helps Mayo a lot to achieve that. But he's looking at his leg and then he stamps on it.
Yeah.
You cannot, here, I'll put this to you. If a John Small did that, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, your mask is slipping.
In terms of, I'm not trying to say, I'm more talking about John Small, but I'll give you another example. If someone like a Ryan McMenamin did that, I know he's not playing anymore. If someone like Aaron McKay did that, someone that has more of a reputation for being a bit cheeky, sometimes they're on the dirty side, there'd be uproar over that.
Yeah, but the only thing I'd say though is even if Ryan O'Donoghue got cited, even if he got a suspension, he would get that would be overturned.
Oh yeah, of course.
Because of the way the justice system in the GAA works and in sport works now, all you have to do is hire a solicitor and find some loophole. I can't remember who it was last year was on his was on a Zoom disciplinary meeting, and the solicitor pointed out something about it being on Zoom instead of being in person. There was some weird protracted loophole that a solicitor could find because they're fluent in legalese, and the whole thing got thrown out. So it's not like as if he wouldn't get suspended anyway. And it's
For
not a
sure,
pile on Ryan O'Donoghue. We're just talking about an incident in isolation, but he did stand on his foot.
Of course he did.
And Sean Kelly was carrying his foot. Now, he probably wasn't great anyway. I think they really tried to load his rehab because he was I don't know how he walked off the pitch against Armagh. He could barely lift his foot.
It's
And
just
I think it was
not
in a
that
boot.
though. It's that like it's the intention. And I'm sorry, like, look, he's a cracking footballer. He's a cracking footballer. But I'm sorry, I've lost a lot of respect for him having seen that. Like, you're not playing tough there. You're playing dirty there. You're trying to injure another player. Or you're trying to hurt another player. It's the same thing. I don't care who they are. I lost respect for Roy Keane when he openly came out and said that he wanted to injure Haaland. Like, I don't care who you are. If you go out and you try to injure someone, I don't respect that. I just don't respect that. You're not playing fair. You're not playing within the rules. You're not playing the game the way it should be played. You're trying to injure someone. Like, you're trying to actually hurt them. That's going to affect them outside of the pitch. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's going to affect him when he walks home now. I don't respect that. And going into this game, like, I think who picks up him, because he will be playing. And look, I'm not annoyed about this, that he will be playing. Because look, as speaking with someone from Dublin, Jim Connolly got sent off, I know, twice. And then his suspension got overturned for big games. One of them was against Mayo. I think it was 2015, because I remember he was getting booed every time he touched the ball.
I think that was at the DRA one that got announced like that morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was a late call up, and the Mayo fans were booing him every time he touched the ball. He shouldn't have had his suspension overturned, but he did. So if Ryan O'Donoghue plays this game, we can't complain, because Connolly played that game when he shouldn't have.
There's a long history of, even Ryan McMenamin. You mentioned Ryan McMenamin. Like, I think I remember him getting a pardon really late in the day for, like, I think he like knelt down on someone's neck. Was it?
John McEntee.
Yeah.
McEntee.
And I mean, it was pretty blatant on the TV.
Oh, he didn't kneel down. He didn't kneel down. He dropped his knees on McEntee's head. Like,
I think one of the funniest phrases that has been coined on the back of all those, like that litany of controversies, is "It looks worse if you slow it down."
Yeah.
or of course it looks bad when you play it in like slow motion.
Yeah.
As if that should negate the whole thing. But yeah, look, I mean, he shouldn't have done it, and we know that these things happen on the pitch, and I'm probably sure there's many more besides that don't get picked up on camera. That one just happens to be front and center of the Sunday game footage, so that's why we're talking about it.
Well, it's like one of those things that I seen James O'Donoghue came out and he was basically saying, "Oh, like, these things happen." I'm like, but they shouldn't happen.
Oh yeah.
You can't come out and use that as like oh well, it's fine. Like, because I remember, I think it was Owen Mulligan came out and like defended Tiernan Kelly after he scraped Damien Comer's face. And he was saying, "Oh, it's grand to punch someone. It's grand to do this." But it's like, no, hang on, Owen. It's not grand to do any of the things above that you've just listed. Like, and then on top of that,
we just sort of accept them as
scraping someone in the face is disgusting. Carry on. So I'm like, on top of that, it's just like, you got to be clever with it. And O'Donoghue, that was deliberate, intentional. He looks at his right leg. He knows his right leg was in the boot last week, and he stands on it. Just simple as. And if a Dublin player said that, I would be saying the exact same thing. Because I would say this, hand on heart, Jim Connolly should not have had his suspension overturned back in 2015 when it was, but it was. So that's why I'm not annoyed that Ryan O'Donoghue will play this game. And I think I've earmarked a few matchups that I cannot wait to see. I think Matthew Ruan will be brought back in, and I can't wait to see him go toe-to-toe with Brian Fenton. I actually think John Small will pick up Jordan Flynn, and I cannot wait to see that one. I think that is a savage matchup between them two. I think Sam Callanan will take Cormac Costello. I'll be very interested to see how that goes, because Callanan did a great job on... let's see, we have a comment in here from Denise. She says, "Let's not forget Ryan O'Donoghue has an MMA background. Could have been a slip of character with the comments made by a couple of Galway players." Well, in my opinion, it makes it worse if he has an MMA background.
That's not making this more precise.
Then that makes him know more what he's doing. Like,
Yeah, that would just give him an insight.
That makes it way worse, in my opinion.
Information how to do it.
No, it is like, I'm sure there were comments made to him by the Galway players. I've no doubt about that there were comments made to him by the Galway players, because everybody's at it. But I'm just saying, as a thing to do, I don't like seeing that. But on top of that, I've said all about Tommy Conroy is the one that I've earmarked the most. Tommy Conroy, I think, because you have a comment in here from Meesman, says man of the match predictions. I think if Mayo win, I actually think Tommy Conroy will be man of the match. I think he can do serious damage. And when I throw this back to you, I want you to give your prediction on who you actually think will win this one.
Yeah, I think Tommy Conroy as well would be a big man of the match contender there. He got 1 point against Galway, who just slipped by 2 or 3 lads, like untouched, and tapped it over. He is an unbelievable mover. He's exactly what you'd want in a corner forward, and no more than Ryan O'Donoghue. Just brilliant movement, great pace, really agile, super footballer. Who's going to win it? I'm going to say Mayo, because it'd be the most Mayo thing to do to beat Dublin. I think Dublin, I mean, aside from Roscommon, they haven't really been tested. You know, they're a little bit undercooked. Like the Sligo game was just not a challenge. And Kildare, when they got their second bite at them, didn't really muster much of a game there either. The Roscommon one really was the big one. And then Roscommon, didn't really sustain it, ended up getting, knocked out then by Cork at the weekend. So just on that basis, that's the only reason I would side favor slightly towards Mayo. The matchups there you've mentioned, they're going to be super tight. It'd be interesting to see who James Durkin is going to pick up as well. What way are Dublin going to go as regards selection as well, because they have, returned to their old stock. They've brought them back in. I presume Cluxton's going to start again. He's been brought back in for a reason. It was such a big surprise to see him included in the squad. Like, it was actually, I don't know if we talked about it, but the fact that they kept that so quiet in an era where you can't keep anything quiet. Like, it is impossible to keep anything from the media, because somebody slips it to someone and someone posts it on Twitter. But in that, I mean, they really kept that the most well-kept secret. It wasn't until we saw pictures of him kind of going online that we knew he was back. And I know that's been criticised a good bit, that, why are you going back to Stephen Cluxton when you've got good goalkeepers who are doing the job? Does it suggest a bit of fear in the Dublin camp that they feel they need to go back to the tried and trusted to try and get back to winning ways again?
I have a personal theory on that. I think Desi wants to win one more All-Ireland and get out the door.
Possibly, yeah.
You can't tell me that bringing back a 41-year-old goalkeeper is a move for the future, which tells me that Desi is just trying to win. I can't imagine the pressure that comes with being the Dublin boss, especially now that they've gone out in, back-to-back semi-finals. And a lot of people saying, people would start to question the legitimacy of the All-Ireland that he did win in 2020. Well, was it an easy year? Because, apart from the All-Ireland final, Dublin didn't play a Division 1 team in the run through to the final. And then in a once-off game against a Mayo side in transition, they won the All-Ireland. And I'm being honest, that's the easiest All-Ireland I've ever seen a team win. I'm not trying to say in a bad way. That was against the Mayo side that had just been relegated, that they won the All-Ireland final. They beat Cavan in the semi-final. And then they absolutely wiped the floor with awful Leinster teams in the championship that year. So it's like, I'm sure he's thinking, look, let me win one more, shut the haters up, shut the critics up, and bounce. Get out of here. And I think bringing back Cluxton is why he's done that. Yeah,
it's a good theory. And the same with Jack McCaffrey and Paul Mannion. Like Paul, I was up in Croke Park for the Roscommon game, and I mean, he got taken off. It's not really a common sight that you'd see with a guy like Paul Mannion. But then, Basquel has been brilliant this year. I've actually really like the way he plays, but I know again, Sligo, you couldn't really put too much weight on that result. And I know we're not talking about the Kerry Tyrone game, but I think Kerry are in a similar boat. They're not really that well tested. Although the Cork game was a slightly fortunate result. That penalty was kind of a controversial call. Had they not got it, the result might have taken on a different shape. But they're a bit undercooked coming into it as well. But then they'll love playing against Tyrone. Like, they'll love the opportunity to remind everybody, well, we're the All-Ireland champions for a reason, and to go and do it against Tyrone, who they've got huge beef with, both more recently and in the distant past as well. Yeah, it's interesting to consider what way it's going to go though against Dublin Mayo. I'm not 100% sure. I said Mayo. I'll still say Mayo, but I'm not fully convinced in even why I think that.
Yeah, well, I'll use this time now to give my prediction on how I think. Okay, so this is how I think this game is going to go. I think there's a route to victory there for either team. But based off what I said earlier in the podcast, I think Dublin could, okay, so here's how I think the game is going to go. I think Dublin actually can win this game. Dublin probably will win this game. So if I had to say, a winner in this game, it's so hard to call. I think there's a route there to victory for both sides. Mayo have been fantastic against Galway, against Kerry, but then they've completely dropped the ball in other games. And as I was saying, there's a similar style of team that can get at them. Roscommon's defensive system got at them. Cork's defensive system got at them. Louth's defensive system got at them. Dublin have played quite defensive at times this season. So I am going to go with Dublin to win this game, based off that I think Dublin will play more defensive in this game, try to frustrate Mayo the way that Roscommon did, the way that Louth did, the way that Cork did, and they'll try to hit them then with Costello, Mannion, Con O'Callaghan. Kieran Kilkenny's due a big game as well. Look, I could absolutely see Mayo winning, but it's just, if I had to pick, I probably would lean towards Dublin just about. And it's not that I don't think Mayo can win. I absolutely do think Mayo can win. But it's so hard to call. And I just feel like maybe Dublin might edge it slightly. But again, wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if Mayo take it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't really argue with too much there, because the margins are so slim between them. Every time nearly every time, certainly, that they play each other, it goes down to the wire. It comes down to some bizarre event or something to separate them. And I imagine it's going to be something similar again.
Denise, before we finish up, says, do you see Dean Rock coming on? No.
I don't think so. I don't think so. He hasn't been great even from freeze.
Yeah.
When he has come on.
He took one against Roscommon that I was like, what was that? Barely got off the ground.
Yeah.
So
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. I think if he's not coming on to take the freeze, he's not that quick anymore. I don't see what he would offer that Lorcan O'Dell wouldn't offer, or Mannion, if he doesn't start, wouldn't offer, or Basquel, if he doesn't start, wouldn't offer. Yeah. I think they might bring him on late in the game for his experience if the game goes down. Well, when the game goes down to the wire, because it will.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is going to be decided by someone. Like, let's be real. This game is going to be decided by somebody hitting the post, somebody missing a huge opportunity, a handling mistake, a red card, a black card. It's going to be a huge talking point. It's going to be no more than 1 point, 2 points, the victory for either team. I just can't wait for it. I think whenever these teams meet, it's just complete fireworks. I can't wait. I can't wait to see who wins. I really can't wait. I'm going to be at the game. It's going to be some atmosphere. I can't wait for it. All right. So